The cold hum of the Galactic Empire's council chamber was interrupted only by the rhythmic pulse of the massive central monitor, displaying an endless stream of data. The walls, made of alien materials, shimmered under the pale blue lights that seemed to vibrate with tension. Alien species of varying shapes and sizes sat in silence, their eyes flickering between the blinking lights and the holographic images that painted the room. Then, without warning, an alert sounded. Sharp, shrill, and unlike anything they had ever experienced. The Council's lead technician, an insectoid with translucent wings, scrambled to his station, his many arms trembling as they manipulated the console. His voice, barely audible, broke through the silence. "Commander, the Earth vessel has returned." The room fell deathly still. This was impossible. The Earth ship, lost over a century ago, had been assumed destroyed, a casualty of the Great War between the Terrans and the Empire. It was a myth to the galaxy, spoken of only in hushed tones, its final location unknown, its technology irretrievably lost to time. But here it was, on their screens, a faint flickering signal tracing a path across deep space. The commander, a tall being with skin like polished granite, slowly stood from his seat. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the data. His elongated fingers pressed the holographic display, zooming in on the signal, trying to make sense of it. The ship was cloaked, its signature impossible to detect until now. But there was something far more unsettling in the data. It was alive, active, and moving with purpose. "Raise the shields," the commander ordered, his voice cold but laced with unease. The council members exchanged looks of confusion and fear. The council leader, a being of immense intellect, moved forward, his four eyes narrowing as he studied the screen. This should not be possible. The insectoid technician continued his frantic work, fingers dancing over the controls. "The ship is emitting a signal, a coded transmission. It's a message from Earth." The room's tension grew palpable, the air thick with unease. The commander motioned for the transmission to be played. A flickering image appeared, distorted at first, then clearing. A human face, hardened by years of survival, appeared on the screen. His eyes, tired yet resolute, stared directly into the camera. "To the Empire," the voice echoed, rough yet undeniably confident. "You thought you'd wiped us out. You thought humanity was finished. But you were wrong. We've been here hiding, watching, and now we're coming back." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The commander's hand curled into a fist, his gaze fixed on the screen. His heart raced, a feeling foreign to his race, but one that he could not suppress. The Empire had always been the predator, the unquestioned ruler of the galaxy. But the Terrans, they were survivors, and this was something the Empire had never understood. The technician's voice broke the silence again. "The signal, it's repeating. There's something else, something more." A new image flickered to life on the screen, this time a visual of the Earth vessel itself, the one that had been lost for so long. It was massive, far larger than the records had shown. Ancient, yet its design was both crude and sophisticated in ways the Empire's engineers couldn't begin to comprehend. And its surface gleamed with an unearthly, pulsating glow. The council members exchanged frantic whispers, their language a rapid, high-pitched hum that filled the room. The commander remained still, staring at the image. His mind raced through the implications. The ship wasn't just some remnant of an ancient war. It was something far more dangerous, far more advanced. "Prepare the fleet," the commander finally ordered, his voice steady but with a new edge to it. "We need to see this ship for ourselves." As the room scrambled into motion, the commander's gaze never left the image of the human vessel. This was no longer a simple tactical issue. This was a message, a threat wrapped in a promise. Humanity had returned, not as a broken, defeated race, but as something more. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in an instant, and the Empire would have to come to terms with it. As the alien fleet mobilized, the commander stepped back from the screen. A single thought ran through his mind. What did the humans bring with them? The thought gnawed at him as he walked out of the chamber, the cold metal doors sliding shut behind him with an ominous hiss. He had underestimated humanity before. It was a mistake he wouldn't make again. The star systems around the Galactic Empire had been a place of peaceful dominance for centuries. The Empire's ships, designed for both intimidation and efficiency, drifted through space as embodiments of the inevitable. No species had ever dared to challenge them. Earth, once a thriving cradle of human civilization, had been erased from the maps. A long-forgotten casualty of their war with the Terrans, humans were deemed irrelevant. Yet now, from the darkness of the forgotten corners of the galaxy, came the impossible. The human vessel had reappeared. The fleet was ready. A fleet of 3 battle cruisers, each massive and bristling with weaponry, moved into formation, their sleek shapes cutting through the stars as they aligned themselves around the last known position of the Earthship. The commanders of these ships had all received the same orders: engage if provoked, but otherwise observe. And as the fleet entered the coordinates, the chilling reality began to sink in. No ship in the galaxy, not even the Empire's, had ever encountered something like this. The human vessel, its silhouette barely visible on their long-range scanners, was cloaked. But something was different. It was pulsing, a faint energy radiating from its surface, something the scanners couldn't make sense of. The cloaking device was far beyond anything the Empire had encountered in their millennia of galactic domination. There was no signature, no traces, just silence, and yet it was there, existing in the same space, invisible but undeniably present. Commander Sithar, one of the Empire's greatest tacticians, stood at the front of his ship's observation deck, his gaze fixed on the empty space where the human ship was supposed to be. His mind raced through protocols, battle tactics, and responses, but nothing fit. He turned toward his communications officer, a being of fluid form and iridescent skin. "Status on the human vessel," he demanded, his voice like a thunderclap. In the sterile command room, the communications officer hesitated for a moment, his hands moving rapidly across the interface, fingers gliding over holographic controls. No heat signatures, no radiation, no detectable movement, just pulses. "They're coming from all over the ship, Commander, but they don't make any sense. These readings, they shouldn't be possible. There's no energy source capable of sustaining this kind of output." Sithar's eyes narrowed, and he turned to the tactical officer. "What does this mean?" The tactical officer, a being whose jagged crystalline features reflected the dim lights of the bridge, clenched his fist. "It means the humans have developed something we can't comprehend. Perhaps a new kind of technology. Perhaps—" He swallowed, clearly reluctant to voice the unspoken words. "Perhaps something ancient." The mention of ancient struck a chord deep in Sithar's mind. The humans were an ancient species, and if they had found something buried beneath their world, something they had left behind, then they might possess a weapon more devastating than anything the Empire had ever seen. The decision was made. "We approach," Sithar ordered. His voice was firm, but his mind raced. The cloak could be breached, the unknown readings, the mysterious technology, everything screamed of a trap, of something deadly waiting just beyond their reach. Still, he had no choice. The Empire would not show weakness, not to humans, not to anyone. The human ship slowly appeared on their sensors as if it had been waiting. Its silhouette, flickering with strange, pulsing lights, became clearer. The faint outline of its hull was jagged, uneven. Unlike any craft the Empire had ever encountered, The ship was massive, larger than their own battlecruisers, and even the very structure of it seemed to whisper secrets they had no answer for. The cloak dissipated like fog in the wind, leaving the ship fully visible, hovering silently in the vacuum of space. "Commander," the communications officer whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of the discovery. "They're transmitting." "Again." Sithar leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest as the image materialized on the screen. A human figure stood before the camera, just as he had in the previous transmission, but this time his expression was different. There was no anger or bitterness in his eyes. Instead, there was a quiet, unsettling calmness, as if he knew something the aliens did not. "Empire," the human's voice echoed, but this time it was not as loud or threatening as before. It was low, almost gentle. "We've come back as we promised. You thought us weak, and perhaps we were, but now you'll see what you've forgotten." Sithar felt a chill run down his spine. This was not the anger-fueled rhetoric he had expected. This was something else, something more calculated. As the transmission ended, he was left staring at the screen, trying to piece together the meaning of the human's words. "Order the fleet to power up weapons," Sithar commanded, his voice hardening with resolve. "We don't know what we're dealing with. Prepare for every eventuality." The crew scrambled into action, but Sithar could feel his mind racing ahead of them. What had the humans uncovered? And more importantly, what did they want with the Empire now? The answer was simple. Revenge. But why now? After all this time? Meanwhile, aboard the human vessel, Captain Sarah Holt stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the massive viewport ahead. She had grown up listening to the stories of humanity's fall, of how the Empire had come and wiped their civilization from the face of the galaxy. But this moment, this was different. The ship had been found, and she was the one to lead them back. Her crew stood behind her, silent but resolute. The years of hiding, of surviving in secret, had led to this. And now, they were ready. The Yao, ancient technology they had uncovered, the secrets hidden beneath the crust of Earth, were more than just a relic. They were a key to power, to survival, and to redemption. As the transmission began, she spoke quietly, but with a certainty that belied her nerves. "This is it. We've waited long enough. Our people are not dead, and now we will show them what we can do." The transmission ended, and Captain Holt watched as the alien fleet began to move. The time had come, but she wasn't just about to attack. No, this was about something far greater, the technology that lay dormant within their ship. Something Earth had built in the final days of their civilization would change the galaxy forever. She only hoped they were ready for what it would unleash. As the Empire's fleet drew closer, the human vessel began to pulse again. This time, however, it was not just a faint signal. It was a burst of energy, a wave that spread out into space. The Empire's shields flared in response, their ship systems automatically compensating for the sudden disturbance. But there was something wrong. The energy was unlike anything they had encountered before. It was too precise. And then, without warning, the human vessel shifted in space. It was as if the very fabric of reality itself had bent in response to the ship's movement. Gravity fluctuated, time seemed to slow, and the surrounding stars appeared to shimmer and warp. The Empire's ships began to vibrate under the strain of the gravitational distortions. "What the hell is happening?" one of the officers screamed. "Our systems! They can't handle it!" "Hold steady!" Sithar barked, but his voice trembled with uncertainty. Then, just as quickly as the disturbance had begun, it stopped. The human vessel was now stationary, hovering in the vast emptiness of space, but it was surrounded by an eerie silence. The Empire's fleet had been thrown off course, their movements sluggish as they tried to regain control, and that was when it hit them. The humans weren't just hiding technology. They had rediscovered something far older, far more powerful. A weapon, a technology that could manipulate the very forces of nature itself. The Empire had no defense against it. Sithar's breath caught in his throat as he realized the terrifying truth. They were no longer the hunters. The humans had returned, and they had come armed with something that even the most advanced empire could not comprehend. The power shift had already begun. ChatGPT said, "The tension in the command room of the Empire's flagship was suffocating. The hum of the ship's engines, once steady and reliable, now felt like a distant hollow echo. The officers stood motionless, their eyes locked on the holographic projections that displayed the human vessel's movements. The once unshakable confidence of the Empire's military had begun to crack, replaced by a quiet, growing dread. Commander Sithar paced the room, his footsteps heavy and deliberate, each step echoing off the metal walls. He could feel the weight of every eye on him, every thought in the room, all focused on the human ship that now hovered just beyond their reach. It wasn't just the ship itself that unnerved him. It was the implications. The technology they had uncovered, the ancient power they had awakened. It was beyond anything the Empire had ever faced. And now the humans weren't just survivors. They were players in a game they had once been excluded from. The fleet was in disarray. Each of the 3 battle cruisers struggling to regain their positioning after the destabilizing pulse from the human ship. Sithar's tactical officer, a being of jagged, obsidian-like skin, was still scrambling to reroute their systems. But every command seemed to fall short. The human ship's influence on space-time was undeniable. It wasn't just technology. It was a force that until this moment had only existed in legend and myth. "We can't hold this position much longer, Commander," the tactical officer finally spoke, his voice strained. "Their ship's gravity manipulation is disrupting our systems, throwing our ships off balance. Our shields are overloading from the energy pulses." Sithar stopped pacing and turned sharply toward the officer. His usual calm demeanor was slipping, replaced by a frustration that only added to the unease. "This should not be happening. We have the most advanced fleet in the galaxy. A primitive human ship should not be capable of this." The officer's face remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "We're not dealing with a normal human ship, Commander. We're dealing with something ancient, something buried beneath Earth, something we should have never underestimated." Sithar nodded slowly, taking a deep breath to center himself. His mind was racing, trying to understand how the humans had gained access to this forbidden technology. The Earth had been a barren, forgotten world for centuries. It had been erased from the Empire's calculations. So how had they returned with a weapon that could destabilize the fabric of reality itself? "Prepare the boarding teams," Sithar ordered, his voice hardening. "We will board their ship and take it by force if necessary. I want that vessel under our control." Now, the communication officer, a slender being with transparent skin that shifted colors with every emotion, hesitated. "Commander, we can't risk boarding their ship with this kind of power. If they're controlling gravity fields and manipulating space-time, they could tear our ships apart with a single burst." Sithar's gaze was cold, unwavering. "Do it. I will not be the commander who cowers in fear at a human ship." The human vessel, though massive, was eerily silent. Its exterior shimmered in the void of space, its dark, jagged hull reflecting the distant stars in sharp, distorted angles. It was nothing like the sleek, streamlined ships of the Empire. It was alien in its own right. Its design was a mixture of brute force and elegant complexity, a contradiction that only added to its mystery. Captain Sarah Holt stood at the center of the command deck, her hands clasped behind her back as she surveyed the endless blackness of space. The strange, pulsing hum of their ship reverberated through the room, a constant reminder of the power they now controlled. It was almost hypnotic. Her crew was silent as well, each of them lost in their own thoughts, their own concerns. The years of hiding, of scraping by in the shadows, had led them to this point. Now the Empire was coming. They had made contact, and it was only a matter of time before the Empire's fleet arrived. But they weren't afraid. They had no reason to be. They had awakened something that could change the entire course of history. The Empire's might, its overwhelming force, meant nothing in the face of what they had uncovered. "Captain," a voice broke her reverie. It was Lieutenant Anders, one of the senior officers, his face tense with concern. "We've detected a fleet. 3 ships. They're approaching fast. It's the Empire." Sarah turned to him, her face unreadable. "I know, but we've prepared for this." The lieutenant hesitated. What if they decide to attack? Sarah's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. "Then we fight, but not the way they think. This isn't just about a battle. It's about showing them what humanity is truly capable of. They thought they could wipe us out. They thought we were nothing, but we're more than they could ever imagine." Anders nodded, his doubts slowly dissolving as Sarah's confidence bled into him. "What's the plan, then?" Sarah turned back to the viewport, watching as the fleet of Empire ships grew closer. "We let them think they have control. We let them make the first move. But when the time comes, we show them what we've got." The Empire's fleet was now only minutes away, and Sithar stood on the bridge of his flagship, eyes locked on the human vessel. His crew was tense, their eyes darting between the holographic displays that showed the human ship's position. The plan was simple: board, capture, and disable the ship. If the humans didn't comply, the Empire would have no choice but to destroy them. The consequences of failure were unimaginable. "Prepare boarding parties," Sithar repeated, his voice cold. "We take this ship, or we die trying." As his crew scrambled to execute his orders, Sithar's thoughts returned to the strange, unsettling feeling that had gripped him when he first saw the human vessel. This wasn't just a ship. It was a message, a statement of defiance. The humans had survived. They had returned, and the Empire, in all its might and arrogance, had failed to foresee this. Suddenly, the bridge lit up with a warning. "Commander!" the tactical officer shouted, his voice shaking with urgency. "Their ship is emitting a massive energy pulse. We're detecting irregular gravitational shifts again. Our shields are destabilizing." Sithar's eyes widened. In disbelief, "Deploy the countermeasures, now!" It was too late. The energy pulse hit the Empire's ships with devastating force, shaking them to their cores. The ships lurched, their systems flickering in and out of functionality. Shields cracked and failed under the weight of the disturbance. The gravitational field was fluctuating wildly, warping space itself. It was like trying to fight against the very fabric of the universe. And then, as quickly as it had started, the pulse stopped. But the damage was done. The Empire's fleet had been thrown off course. Their ships were barely functioning. Sithar could feel the sweat building on his forehead as he realized the enormity of their predicament. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice now tinged with fear. The communications officer, eyes wide with terror, shook his head. "It wasn't just a pulse, Commander. It was a wave, a gravitational wave, and it came from their ship." Sithar stood frozen, his mind racing. If they had developed this kind of technology, if they could manipulate space-time on this level, then the Empire's fleet had no hope of winning this conflict. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about survival. The human vessel was now fully visible, its dark form looming ahead of them, as if waiting for them to make their move. And despite the fear gnawing at him, Sithar knew one thing for certain: they had no choice but to engage. The Empire couldn't back down now. He turned. To the tactical officer, his voice low but filled with determination. "Prepare to board the ship, we're going in." As the boarding parties assembled, ready to confront the unknown, the commander felt the weight of his actions pressing down on him. This wasn't just a mission, it was the beginning of a war that would change the galaxy forever. And the humans, once thought to be extinct, were leading the charge. As the Empire's soldiers made their way to the hangars, the sound of their boots reverberated through the halls. Sithar watched them go, his mind filled with a mixture of dread and anticipation. The humans had returned, and they would make sure the Empire never forgot it. The Empire's ships were in chaos. Sithar stood at the heart of the command deck, hands clenched into fists, his every muscle tense with the realization that they were losing control of the situation. The human vessel, impossibly advanced, had disrupted their entire fleet with a single energy pulse. The crew, once certain of their supremacy, were now questioning everything they thought they knew about warfare, about power, about humanity itself. He turned to face his tactical officer, whose face was ashen. "Report!" Sithar demanded, his voice dangerously low. We're losing stability, Commander," the officer stammered. "The gravity waves are interfering with our control systems. The shields are only holding at 30%. We can't engage in a prolonged conflict in this state. If we don't regain control soon..." Sithar's mind raced as he processed the impossible. A single ship, one that had been written off as lost for centuries, had returned with technology beyond the Empire's understanding. The Empire had built the most advanced fleet the galaxy had ever seen, and now it was nothing more than a target, vulnerable to the humans' mysterious power. "We can't afford to retreat," Sithar said coldly, his eyes narrowing as he watched. The human vessel hover silently in the distance. The human ship was a dark, enigmatic force. Its energy readings were still fluctuating, seemingly random, as if the ship itself was not bound by the same laws of physics the Empire adhered to. It was almost as if the very idea of space and time bent to its will. "Commander, the boarding." "Teams are ready," the communications officer reported, his voice hesitant. "They're standing by for your command to engage." Sithar's expression hardened. This was their only chance. If they could board the human ship, seize control, and extract its secrets, they might still have a chance to survive. He knew the risks, but there was no other option. His reputation, the future of the Empire, and the balance of power in the galaxy were at stake. "Deploy the teams," Sithar ordered. The human vessel remained eerily silent as the boarding pods launched from the Empire's ships, their sleek forms gliding through the vacuum of space toward their target. The soldiers aboard the pods were elite, trained for missions that required precision and absolute control. They had fought countless enemies, won countless victories, but none of them had ever faced something like this. As the pods breached the atmosphere of the human ship, the first thing they noticed was the oppressive silence. No hum of engines, no sounds of life. It was as if the ship was a dead thing, drifting in the void, waiting for something. The air within the ship was thick with a sense of foreboding. The walls dark and reflective, coated in an eerie glow that seemed to shift and pulse with a life of its own. The Empire's soldiers moved cautiously through the hallways, their weapons drawn, their senses heightened. There was no telling what they might encounter aboard this strange, ancient vessel. They reached the heart of the ship quickly, the central command room looming ahead. Suddenly, the lights flared to life, casting harsh shadows on the walls. The soldiers froze, their eyes darting around the room as a voice echoed through the ship's speakers. "You're too late." The voice was unmistakably human, calm, confident, and utterly unafraid. The soldiers instinctively raised their weapons, but nothing prepared them for what came next. The ship itself seemed to react to their presence, the walls pulsing with a deep, resonant hum. A blinding light flashed from the center of the room, and the soldiers stumbled back, momentarily disoriented. From the blinding light, a figure appeared. Captain Sarah Holt, standing in the heart of the human ship, her face illuminated by the strange glow. She was unarmed, but her presence was commanding. "You think you can take this ship by force?" she said, her voice unwavering. "You think you can steal what we've uncovered?" The soldiers hesitated, their grip on their weapons tightening. But the overwhelming power emanating from the ship itself made them pause.